Forget everything you thought you knew about borders. What if some US states feel more Canadian than American? Imagine snow-covered towns where hockey reigns supreme. Locals say, sorry, without irony, and maple syrup is treasured like gold. Could it be that some of these states secretly wish their flag bore a maple leaf instead of stars and stripes? From icy mornings to a neighborly charm that rivals even the friendliest Torontonians, these places don't just border Canada, they are Canada in spirit. Let's explore 10 US states that could join Canada tomorrow, and hardly anyone would notice. Number 10, Vermont. Have you ever walked through a town so quiet it feels like the trees are eavesdropping? Where the most dramatic event might be tapping the wrong maple tree. That's Vermont, a state so serene and community-driven that you might believe you've wandered into Quebec without realizing it. But Vermont doesn't just look Canadian, it acts Canadian too. Nearly 70% of its land is forested, and snow covers the ground for more than a third of the year. Residents here are among the most polite and environmentally conscious in the nation. They have a deep love for maple syrup, embrace long winters, and their accent is closer to Nova Scotia than New York. With fewer than 650,000 people, Vermont's entire population is smaller than Winnipeg's. Add in the wide open spaces, soft-spoken demeanor, and relentless snowfall, and you might as well be looking at Canada's long-lost cousin. Number 9, Minnesota. Think your winters are harsh? Try living in a place where the cold can freeze your eyelashes shut and the wind sounds suspiciously Canadian. Welcome to Minnesota, or should we say, southern Manitoba. This state mirrors Canada in ways that go far beyond geography. From backyard hockey rinks to the frequent, "yeah," and "you betcha," heard in conversation, Minnesota doesn't just share a 547-mile border with Canada. It shares a cultural bond even deeper. Minnesota is known for its more than 10,000 lakes, almost as many as all of Ontario. With its Scandinavian heritage, warm hospitality, and even poutine served at the state fair, Minnesota could easily pass for a Canadian province. It's no wonder this northern state feels more like it belongs next to Saskatchewan or Alberta than the American Midwest. Number 8, Maine. Imagine a place where the ocean doesn't sparkle, it growls. Where the fog doesn't lift, it lingers. And where people don't just survive winter, they become it. That's Maine, the northeastern tip of the US that has been quietly flirting with Canada for decades. This isn't just about proximity. Maine shares borders with both New Brunswick and Quebec, but the cultural similarities run much deeper. In towns like Madawaska and Van Buren, French is spoken as easily as English, and Canada Day holds real significance. Over 90% of Maine is forested, the most of any US state. That's not just beautiful, it's unmistakably Canadian terrain. In winter, snowstorms can dump several feet overnight, with wind chills that bite through layers. Yet, it's not just the weather that gives it a northern feel. From lobster boats in icy harbors to lighthouses hidden in dense fog, and tight-knit communities where no one's in a rush, Maine feels profoundly Canadian. Drive far enough north, and you may go hours without seeing another person, just pine trees, icy roads, and bilingual road signs. It feels like Quebec, because in many ways, it already is. Number 7, Washington. Washington is a place where it rains so often that moss grows on street signs. The skies are perpetually gray, the coffee always hot, and the people calm, slightly quirky, and politely distant. It's not British Columbia, but you'd be forgiven for thinking so. Seattle lies just 140 miles from Vancouver, and the two cities feel like cultural twins, both tech-savvy, socially conscious, and surrounded by breathtaking natural landscapes. Washington's economy is globally focused, its environmental policies align with Canada's, and even its wildlife migrates freely across the border. In parts of northern Washington, Canadian radio comes through clearer than American stations. There's even a town, Point Roberts, that's only accessible by driving through British Columbia. With their environmentalism, vegan-friendly menus, and a love for all things understated, Washingtonians might feel more Pacific Northwest than American West. It's a state that may not wave the maple leaf, but it certainly lives by its values. Number 6, Michigan. There's a place in America where water surrounds you, snow traps you, and the accents could fool you into thinking you've already crossed into Canada. Welcome to Michigan, also known as Southern Ontario's secret sibling. Especially in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan feels almost detached from the rest of the U.S., not only geographically but culturally. It shares a long border with Ontario and connects via the Ambassador Bridge and Detroit-Windsor Tunnel. Fun fact: Detroit is the only U.S. city where you look south to see Canada. Locals in the Up say, naturally, snowmobile to the grocery store, and regularly listen to Canadian radio. Hockey here isn't just a sport, it's a way of life. Winters are brutal, with Arctic-level wind chills and snow deep enough to bury cars. Life moves slowly in towns like Sault Ste. Marie and Marquette, where hunting season makes bigger headlines than politics, and community still matters. Economically, Michigan aligns with Canada's northern provinces. Forestry, freshwater fishing, and cross-border trade are central to local life. In these rural areas, ties with Canadian neighbors are growing stronger by the year. Number 5. Alaska. Think you know cold? Try Alaska, a place darker than midnight and colder than Mars. It's America's largest, wildest, and arguably most Canadian state. Alaska shares a staggering 1,538-mile border with Canada, more than any other U.S. state. In many areas, the only road in or out passes through Yukon or British Columbia. While technically American, Alaska often feels more like a remote Canadian province carved out of wilderness. In remote towns, Canadian weather systems, emergency alerts, and even TV stations are relied upon. Communities often operate off-grid, resembling Canada's Northern Territories in both lifestyle and outlook. With its deep respect for nature, rugged independence, and rich Indigenous heritage, Alaska's culture parallels Canada's northern provinces closely. Even healthcare and supply chains sometimes depend on Canadian infrastructure. Many Alaskans admit they feel more connected to Whitehorse than to Washington, D.C. Number 4. Oregon. In Oregon, people don't honk. They don't rush. They compost. Ask for directions, and you might be guided to a hiking trail instead of a freeway. This is where nature comes first, the air smells like cedar, and the entire attitude leans suspiciously Canadian. Portland and Eugene prioritize recycling, wear outdoor gear over suits, and value kindness as a form of currency. Oregon may not share a border with Canada, but it definitely shares its mindset. The state's progressive values, environmental awareness, and love for all things local, farms, art, and even bike shed coffee roasters, mirror British Columbia. With over 30 million acres of forest, Oregon's rugged wilderness feels like Canada's west coast. Locals even prefer overcast skies, leaning into rain and mist as part of their identity. It's not just weather, it's a lifestyle, and one that closely matches Canada's coastal provinces. Number 3. New Hampshire. Tucked into the northeastern U.S. lies New Hampshire, a place where winters are long, roads are quiet, and the motto, "Live free or die," is worn with calm pride. Despite the bold slogan, the way of life here is surprisingly reserved, and very Canadian. Bordering Quebec and Maine, New Hampshire shares deep cultural ties with its northern neighbors. French echoes through the towns, snow comes early and lingers, and the people are humble and self-reliant. Less New York, more Ottawa. With over 80% forest cover and a lifestyle focused on skiing, snowshoeing, and fishing, New Hampshire's seasonal rhythm aligns with Quebec and New Brunswick. Its small towns still have general stores and signage unchanged since the 1960s. New Hampshire has no general sales tax and follows a local governance model, much like the decentralized system found in Canadian provinces. Town halls matter here. Community voices shape policy. In the depths of winter, pipes freeze and winds howl, yet the locals don't complain, they adapt. That's not just toughness, that's northern resilience. Number 2. Montana. While some places are quiet, Montana is still. Here, the wind carries only its own echo, and the stars feel almost touchable. Roads stretch endlessly, and neighbors are more likely to be elk than people. Montana shares a 545-mile border with Alberta, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan. But its Canadian connection goes far beyond geography. The snow-packed mountains, wide plains, and deep-rooted love of nature mirror Canada's character closely. Drive north through Glacier National Park and you'll enter Alberta's Waterton Lakes, virtually indistinguishable. Together, they form the Waterton Glacier International Peace Park, a rare cross-border sanctuary. In places like Havre and Eureka, Canadian radio and television are more familiar than broadcasts from Billings. Ranchers near the border often have closer ties with Saskatchewan than with their own state capital. Number 1 North Dakota. If you've ever driven across a flat, frozen expanse and felt like the sky might fall, you've experienced North Dakota. This northern frontier of America already lives like part of Canada. North Dakota shares a 310-mile border with Manitoba and Saskatchewan. From the prairie culture to the biting cold and quiet way of life, it mirrors rural Canada almost perfectly. Fargo could easily be confused with Regina, just with better football, and Grand Forks feels like a snow-covered Canadian outpost. The population density here is so low, some counties have more cows than humans. Accents resemble those from Saskatchewan, and snowstorms can stretch for days with temperatures plunging below 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet locals don't panic. They plug in their cars, layer up, and carry on. That's weather wisdom straight from Winnipeg. Even the economy is strikingly similar. Agriculture, energy, and cross-border trade dominate. Some towns are so close to the Canadian border they've formed joint emergency response plans with their northern neighbors. That's not cooperation, it's coexistence. So, what do you think? 10 U.S. states that already look, act, and live like they're part of Canada. From frosty plains to shared culture and nearly identical accents, these places aren't just near the border, they're crossing it in spirit. Subscribe to stay ahead of the curve, because we're just getting started. Like the video if you learned something new, and share it with someone who says they'd never live in Canada, until they realize they kind of already do.